welcome to this special coverage of the Goods and Services Tax. I'm Kritika Saxena. The big breaking news at this hour, the Integrated and the Central GST laws have been cleared by the GST Council today. The Council has decided that a peak rate of 40% will be put on paper, and that has confirmed our CNBC TV 18 news break. Let me bring in a very expert panel of guests. I have with me Pratik Jain from PwC, MS Money from Delhi joining me in the studio. We have Sachin Menon from KPMG as well as Harishankar S from EY. Mr. Subramaniam, let me come to you first. You heard the rollout date being mentioned. I'll go into the rate and the details, etc. But do you believe that 1st July is a realistic target?
Well, if they say they've approved the IGST and CGST bills today, then there is a possibility that July 1st can happen, because SGST and UTGST, like you said, are going to be more or less along the same lines of the CGST bills, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And if the changes that have been recommended today are only language changes, and that's going to be circulated within the next 72 hours back to the states for their comments, then I think on 16th when they meet, they would probably approve both the UT and SGST, and so that all together can go for a cabinet approval. So that's what seems to be what the finance minister said. So if that is true, then I think July 1st is definitely doable.
Mani, you heard FM's comments. I understand that we are expecting a similar model, but if you look at if there are any comments from states, individual states have given their comments and their separate reservations. If at all there are any hiccups, do you foresee a delay there that we could go beyond the 15th of March?
Honestly, I don't see too much of a delay because of two reasons. The first is the fact that it was mentioned that over the next 3 days, the views of the Law Commission would be factored in, and the state GST and the UT GST bills would get approved. It's also very interesting that the next meeting of the GST Council is going to be on 15th of March, whilst Parliament will be in session. And the fact that the next meeting is when the Parliament is in session, to me typically means that they are going to go ahead with the parliamentary approval, possibly towards the later part of the Parliament session. So to that extent, the state's views I don't think would cause any hiccups, because they seem to have been discussed bare bones. And even yesterday's development where they said that they are keeping a maximum enabling limit of 40% towards the GST was also, I believe, to accommodate the views of certain states. So to me, it now seems certain that the GST is rolling out. And I would say that today's development is actually taking us closer to July 1st. Rather than...
So you don't think September is a likelihood?
Seems very unlikely unless between now and when Parliament is in session, which depends largely on the political developments, does not depend on what GST Council does. But for that, I think it signifies that we are looking now certainly for a July 1 rollout.
Okay, barring any
unforeseen contingencies on the political side.
Okay, let me bring in Pratik there. Pratik, in terms of the ceiling rate, my colleague Sapna had earlier broken that there could be a ceiling rate of 40%. That's been confirmed. But you heard Finance Minister clarify on the ceiling rate, and what he says is that that's the higher limit after 5 years. Your perspective, could that cause any form of confusion? Even though 28% is still the higher rate, could the ceiling cause any amount of confusion before the implementation?
Pratik, I don't think ceiling causes confusion. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Pratik.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So I don't think that there is any confusion on this, but there is a concern certainly, because right from the beginning when the standard rate was being talked about at around 18-20%, now anyway we have made a departure by having a 28% category. And while you might say that you won't tinker the rate immediately, why do we need to have such a high sort of maximum rate of 20 and 20, which is 40%? And mind you, over and above 28%, there is a cess also which will apply on some commodities. So I don't see any reason why the government wants to have such a high ceiling, and therefore I think industry would be concerned that once GST is implemented, even if it is not increased now, it can increase later. So I don't see any reason why the government should keep such a high ceiling and create unnecessary concerns from the industry. I mean, ideally they should have stuck with that 28%. That too, to my mind, is is on a higher side. So, but I don't think it creates a confusion. I mean, I don't think there will be a roadblock because of this issue for a 1st July rollout to my mind.
Okay, let me bring Sachin Menon as well in. Sachin, do you agree that this wouldn't be a roadblock as such? And what is the clarity that you think is still required as far as the 40% ceiling rate is concerned?
Well, before coming to the ceiling rate, what I am concerned about is that CGST, IGST bills have been approved by the GST Council. Now, if you look at the SGST law, it is a mirror image, except for small changes. It's a mirror image of the CGST law, which is supposed to be the SGST. Now, the fact that there is no consensus in passing the draft SGST law in this meeting means that states want to have some major differences or major changes compared to the CGST law, which is approved now. Otherwise, they should have approved it right away. That's a matter of concern, because is it that, you know, the old way bills, old entry permit, etc. is again coming back? Whether the state want to make it more complicated? Is that the reason for this is being not approved?
What do you think would be the point of deference from a state's perspective on SGST?
No, in fact, see, the CGST and IGST law is fairly simple.
Yeah.
Now, I think I get a feeling that over a period of time, even the bureaucracy want it to be a little more complicated, maybe because of their existential issue. There is an effort of making the law more complicated. And if it is not so, I don't think that if they can approve CGST, it is a mirror image of SGST and vice versa, why they should not have approved that in this meeting. So this is a matter of concern. Maybe it may be a feeling.
Okay.
It's a matter of concern.
Okay.
As regards the rates are concerned, the 40% is concerned, it may not be a matter of so much of concern, because even in the current law, there is something called an effective rate and a tariff rate.
Yeah.
Now, this is actually kept because whenever there is a duty rate change happening in the law, they have to go back to the parliament or the assembly to get it ratified, and therefore the administration, for administrative convenience, the higher rate is kept, and as and when or if at all there is a requirement of increasing the rate from say 18 to 20% or 28 to 30%, they don't need to go back to the parliament or the assembly again, and that is the reason. And perhaps the explanation what they are saying is that next 5 years, whatever may be the rate, as far as the states are concerned, it is not of a worry, because they are guaranteed their revenue based on 15-16 base year revenue of tax collection. So states are not concerned about the rates for the next 5 years. After 5 years, and the cess is supposed to be imposed only for the next 5 years. After 5 years, the cess stops. And then you can't imagine that luxury vehicle or the cars, etc., currently attracting 45% of duty will come down to 28%. So therefore, there is a need to increase the rate of duty at that point in time, and therefore perhaps it is justified to have a higher slab as far as this is concerned. In any case, I don't think this will be a detraction from the determination of...
and it's just an administrative...
July.
Okay, fair enough.
I would think so.
Okay, Sachin. Let me bring in Dinesh Kanabar, who's joining in the panel. Dinesh, thanks for stepping in. Coming on the point that Sachin was mentioning, that there could be some differences that states have, and that could be the reason why the SGST wasn't passed. What could be the concerns, and could that be a significant hindrance to the March 15th meeting?
I don't think so, really. I would think that whatever the very fact that the rates ceiling has been agreed to, the very fact that the distribution mechanism has been, compensation mechanism has been agreed to, the very fact that the powers of the center and the state have been agreed to, would just probably demonstrate that this is just a process which is going on. Maybe there are issues which need to be discussed and agreed to, but I don't see that being as a stumbling block when the 15th March meeting happens, really.
And you agree that 1st July is a realistic deadline? Not optimistic, realistic.
So 1st July is a real tight deadline. I am seeing the government's commitment to move towards that. I think the issue really on 1st July is two things. First is the ability of the government to do whatever is required, which includes approval of the rate, and then the government's expectation that if they are ready on a particular date, industry needs to be ready like within weeks or a couple of months of it. And I think the two of that really creates a pressure point. And therefore, 1st July may really be a very, very tight deadline, not from an impossibility of achievement, but from the fact that it is implemented in a way it needs to be.
Okay, fair enough. Let me bring in Mani back into the conversation. Mani, as far as the fitment is concerned, what the suggestion has been that fitment will be taken up parallelly. Where do you think the issues still lie as far as the fitment on different brackets are concerned?
Okay, so that's a very interesting point. But I just wanted to make one point with respect to the 40% that we were discussing. I think if you recollect the 4th meeting of the GST Council, which was, I think, on 3rd and 4th of November 2016, when the rates were decided. In that meeting, the peak rate that was considered was 26%. And after that meeting, I recollect the Finance Minister mentioning that they had increased that to 28 in order to accommodate for certain products whose rates could be lowered and kept at 12%. And that was the basis of 28. So now if 28 is being increased in order to enable it to be taxed at 40, now I have 2 points of view on that. The first is that this may not be something which is going to happen after 5 years.
Okay.
And I don't think anyone
it leaves space for ambiguity.
It leaves space for ambiguity. And what I would expect is, I'm sure the GST Council in its wisdom has agreed to 40 and therefore I accept 40. All that I would expect is that I'm sure in the GST Council, some states and possibly the center would have brought out a list of products which needed to be taxed beyond 28. And here I'm not talking to the 4 categories of products which are subjected to a cess. Possibly some category of products they felt in their wisdom would need to be taxed beyond 28. What would help business is if there is some transparency in respect of the products which in future could be taxed beyond 28.
Correct.
Now then those businesses could be prepared, their user industries could be prepared, depending on whether it is a B2B or B2C, item. As far as the fitment is concerned, what I broadly believe is this is something which now needs to be done on a top priority.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned before,
and that can happen in three months.
That has to happen much before 3 months because for any business to prepare in terms of the GST impact, in terms of what they do, in terms of how they deal with their vendors, how they deal with their customers, they need to know the rate. Because today a business is making a payment of an excise duty plus a VAT in certain cases. Now if this is going to be replaced by a GST, is it going to be at 18? Is it going to be at 28? I would say it's a very fundamental question and it's as fundamental as the legislation itself. So possibly a lot of attention needs to be paid to that now.
Okay, I'll ask the same question to Mr. Subramaniam. Hari, as far as the fitment is concerned, do you think 1 month is enough? Because if we are passing it in March and you're aiming a July implementation deadline, do you think that 1 month period is enough for a fitment decision? And what do you think will be the issues that will need to be highlighted there? The question to you, Hari.
No, as far as the fitment is concerned, the buckets are already known, and that's what they've been telling all through. You look at the buckets, there is going to be 3 buckets, 3 to 9, which possibly will cover goods which will probably be at 5. Then you have 9 to 15, which could be at 12, and then you have 15 to 21, which could be in 18, and beyond 21 at 28. What is critical is what happens to those products which are beyond 9 and below that, what you call just around 9 or around 15 or around 21. Where do they fall? Do they fall in the lower bucket or do they fall in the higher bucket? That's where the real debate will happen, And there will be some debates on items of mass consumption. So that is where the real debate will be. So I don't think that's too much of an exercise. Having said that, yes, it is better that it's known faster to the industry because they'll have to really tweak all the IT systems and get ready for that. So that to me, it's an exercise that a fair amount of work I know has been done.
Yeah.
They will take it up after the 16th once the laws are passed. Now coming back to the 40% also, I'm not too concerned about the 40%. As long as 40% is not a rate that they are thinking of, other than cess, I'm not too worried, because then there is just a tariff rate from enabling provision so as to not go back to the parliament and state assemblies. And they also mentioned at the press conference, which was interesting, is that if this is an idea of merging cess for those identified items where cess could be, then I think 40% is not an issue. But if the 40% is other than cess, then there is a real concern for the industry. So that's the clarity I would look for.
Yeah.
And as far as rate buckets are concerned, several those buckets are known. A lot of work has been done. They have to fit into those in-between products where the effective rates fall in between those buckets. Where would they fall? Will it be at the lower or the higher? That's what they need to decide, and they need to decide fast, because the industry needs to get an answer to that, because that has an impact on their pricing, an impact on their margins. You need to get the systems right. So that is where I would say I would expect faster clarity, maximum by end of March.
Okay, that's a very tight deadline you're giving, Hari, to the government. But let me ask that.
No, it's not a tight deadline, because if July 1st has to happen, you are running on a tight deadline.
Yeah.
And if you are not going to come out
that's a very heavily optimistic deadline. So if we were to miss that July deadline, do you think September would be realistic, if not optimistic?
Yeah, it can be. It can be. But I can only tell you one thing, and I've seen this journey. It's moved from April 1st to July, and we all talk about September 1st.
Yeah.
See, there is so much time that you can get ready in, And
okay,
you shift the date again from July to September. Again, I'll tell you, you'll be still at the rush state on September. Nothing is going to change on the ground.
Well, that is time to head into a break. Our special discussion on the mega developments of the GST Council meeting continues. Stay right there.